You've packed your gear, planned your route, and you feel ready for the trail. But what if I told you there are hidden dangers that many hikers miss? These aren't your obvious mistakes, but the ones that can sneak up on you when you least expect it. Stick around, because today we're covering what really trips up hikers and how you can stay ahead of the game. Hi there, Mauser here. If you're new to the channel, then welcome. Now, I've been hiking for over 30 years across some of the most challenging terrains all over the place, from the wilds of southwest Tasmania to the fjords of Norway. And in all that time, I have seen some easily avoidable mistakes turn a great hike into a disaster. So in this video, I'm going to cover some of the key essentials that many hikers overlook, which can lead to serious problems, how to prepare for unexpected situations on the trail, simple ways to stay safe even when things don't go as planned, and the most common mistakes that can ruin your hike if you're not aware. These are the dangers you can't afford to ignore, so let's dive straight in. First off, underestimating hydration needs. Let's start with hydration, because this one catches people out all the time, myself included. So hydration refers to the process of supplying the body with water to maintain its proper functioning. And whether you're on a short day hike or a multi-day adventure, your hydration needs are key to making sure you perform at your best and avoid unnecessary risks. So what is the vital role of hydration in your body? Well, just like a garden flourishes with the right amount of water, sunlight, and nutrients, the human body thrives when adequately hydrated. So what does being hydrated do for our body? Why is it so important? Well, let's talk about the multitasking marvel of water. Firstly, temperature regulation. Water acts as your body's built-in cooling system. When you're hot, you sweat, and as the sweat evaporates, it helps to cool you down, a process that requires adequate hydration. Next, joint lubrication. Another way to think of water is as the WD-40 for your joints. It helps cushion and lubricate your joints, allowing them smooth, pain-free movement. And of course, it is a bit more complicated than that, but water is at the foundation. Thirdly, nutrient transport. Water serves as a delivery service, carrying essential nutrients to cells throughout the body, and also waste removal. Hydration also assists with waste removal from your body by flushing out toxins and waste products. So when you hit the trails, your body's water needs kick into high gear. Here's why. Firstly, you have an increased metabolic rate. Hiking is like revving up your body's engine. You're burning fuel, which are the calories, at a much faster rate, and water plays a crucial role in this energy production process. And when you are hiking, your body is also experiencing enhanced cooling demands. So as you exert yourself, your body temperature rises, and to combat this, your body will sweat more, requiring increased water intake to maintain this natural cooling mechanism. Thirdly, the muscle function. Proper hydration is essential for optimal muscle performance and for preventing cramps. This is crucial when tackling challenging terrains, especially in warm weather. If you are at altitude, you also need to take into account altitude considerations. At higher altitudes, you can get an acceleration of fluid loss through increased breathing or respiration and quicker evaporation of sweat. One thing I do strongly remember when I have been at higher altitude is the increased water intake. By maintaining proper hydration during your hike, you're ensuring that your body continues to function efficiently. And this allows you to enjoy your journey and reach your destination feeling energized rather than completely depleted. Even in cooler weather, your body still loses water through sweat and breathing, just like steam from a kettle. If you don't replace that lost water, you can overheat and you can start running into trouble. This is called dehydration, and dehydration is bad. Fatigue creeps in, muscles start cramping, and eventually, well, your concentration starts to fade. And these are all dangerous things when you are out on the trail. And like me, if you've been hiking a while, you've probably experienced one, if not all of these. So how do you tell if you're becoming dehydrated? Well, dehydration can be sneaky, like a slow leak in a car tire. You might not notice it until things are already starting to go wrong. But here are some early warning signs. Firstly, thirst, which reminds me, a bit thirsty myself. It's all right. I digress. Where were we? Thirst. This is your body's emergency signal, like the warning light coming on in your car to say your engine is overheating. If you are thirsty, you're already behind on hydration. Another sign is dry mouth or lips. Your mouth and lips drying are early signs of dehydration also. Another sign is headaches. Think of this as when that car dashboard warning light starts to flash. It's your body telling you that something is off and you better attend to it. Another sign is fatigue and muscle cramps. Without enough water, your muscles seize up like rusty gears that have not been oiled correctly. And lastly, dark urine. This is a quick way to check your hydration. If your urine is pale yellow, you're generally in the clear. Dark yellow or amber means you need to drink up and soon. So what can we do and how do we calculate our water needs? To stay properly hydrated on a hike, the general rule is to drink anywhere from around 0.5 litres or 500 mils per hour for moderate activity to 1 litre of water per hour for more vigorous activity. Now, this is a personal kind of thing depending on your size, etc. But I personally find I sit somewhere in between this. But on hot days, it can be much more. Think of your body like a sponge. Depending on the conditions, it can soak up and lose water at different rates. Factors to consider in regards to water intake include, firstly, the climate. So firstly, the hotter the conditions are, well, it's like running your car with the air conditioner blasting. It burns through the fuel faster and therefore you can dehydrate quicker. Altitude at higher elevations, your body is going to work harder, like a car going uphill, which makes it burn through water even quicker. Also, the intensity and duration of your hike. The harder you hike, the more your body sweats its liquid away. So you're going to need more of it. And also your body size. Larger hikers or those with higher metabolisms are like bigger engines. They need more fuel or water to keep going. A good practice to stay hydrated that I use is to sip regularly. Not just when you feel thirsty, but just constantly making yourself have these little sips of water. I like to call them micro sips. It's the micro sipping technique. This is one of the reasons I personally prefer to carry a water bladder with a hose. I make sure that I am constantly taking steady sips on my hose so that I'm not getting dehydrated throughout the day. Now, a lot of people don't like a bladder option as it is harder to tell how much water you actually have left. But I guess over the years, I've just sort of figured out at my constant micro sipping rate how much water I am going through, and I find it works quite well for me. But do whatever works for you. Just make sure you are taking in regular sips of water. And just like topping off the fuel in your car before a long drive, it's better to stay ahead of the need rather than to catch up later after you're already running on fumes. So what are some effective tips for hydration on the trail? Well, in addition to the micro sipping, one is to pre-hydrate. So before you even start your hike, drink around 500 mils to 1 litre of water. Think of this as filling up the petrol tank before hitting the road. You don't want to start on an empty tank. Next is to carry enough water. Plan your water stops like a road trip. Make sure you are aware and that you know where you can refill or bring enough water with you that's going to last you long enough. For longer hikes, a water filter or purification tablets can be lifesavers, especially if water sources are few and far between, or you have potentially contaminated water. We are lucky in Tasmania that filtering water isn't always necessary, but you should know this before you go. You should know if you need to filter water and where you need to filter water. So another thing you can consider is electrolyte replacement. Now, drinking water is important, but it's only part of the story. Electrolytes like sodium and potassium are the spark plugs that keep your body's electrical system running. While I never used to, these days I do like to take electrolytes with me on most trips. There are heaps of different electrolytes around, and it is a matter of trial and error to find one which you prefer. I prefer something that's sugar-free, that is just a salt basically, but I do find myself craving an electrolyte drink at the end of a long day, and often I will carry a small flask of electrolyte with me on warmer days in addition to my water bladder, so I can just sip on it throughout the day as I need. The other thing you can do, like I said before, is to monitor urine colour. Just like back in the day when we used to have to monitor the oil levels in the car, keeping an eye on your urine colour will give you a good sense of how hydrated you are. You need to aim for pale yellow. Like I said, if it's getting darker, it's time to top up and get more fluid into you ASAP. And I do know people that have sped out from walks early and have departed walks early because they were getting dark urine and they were really worried. So it is an important thing to consider. Hydration is the hidden key to hiking success. It's like keeping your car running smoothly on a long road trip. And if you ignore it, you'll feel the consequences. You'll feel tired legs, headaches, and potentially worse. But if you stay on top of it, along with your energy needs, you'll have the energy and the focus to enjoy the journey and take in the beautiful scenery. And that is where this next hidden danger comes in, overlooking proper food planning. So let's talk about food. When it comes to hiking, food isn't just a luxury, it's literally your fuel. Think of your body like a smartphone. If you don't keep it charged, it's going to run out of juice. And the last thing you want is to power off halfway through your hike. Just like your phone drains faster when you're using it intensely, your body burns through energy quicker when you are tackling tough terrain. So why does proper food planning matter? Well, imagine you are setting off on a long road trip. Would you leave with just enough fuel in the car to make it halfway and then figure out the rest from there? Of course not. The same logic applies to food on a hike. Your body is burning calories at a much faster rate than normal. Whether it's climbing, balancing, or just keeping your body temperature regulated, it is going through more fuel. Even on flat terrain, hiking for hours drains your energy reserves like a car constantly running in a low gear. Without enough fuel, your body starts to shut down in stages. First, you feel a bit tired. Then you start losing your focus. You might become a little bit unreasonable. And if you're not careful, you can hit a full-blown energy crash where even basic movements feel exhausting. I've been there, my friends have been there, and it is definitely something you want to avoid at all costs. And well, what causes this? Well, the biggest mistake is underpacking. One of the biggest errors I see and that I have done myself is underestimating how much food I'll actually need. And as a guide, I would often see hikers on Tasmania's overland track with all sorts of crazy food options for a 5 or 6 day trip. They were out there for 5 or 6 days. Once I literally saw a guy who on a 6-day trip with no more than a box of cookies. That's all he had for the whole trip. By day 3, he was having to obtain food from other hikers and beg and borrow from all the other walkers on the trail. So don't be that guy. When you're hiking, depending on your weight and your metabolism, you can burn anywhere from 300 to 600 calories per hour, depending on the intensity of the trail. And if you're not replacing those calories, you'll run out of energy quick, leading to poor decisions and increased risk of accidents. Now, I've been on hikes back in my early days where I could push on through without stopping for snacks, but what happened? Well, by the early afternoon, I'd be feeling sluggish, my mood would tank, and I'd be more prone to injuries like twisted ankles because my mind wasn't sharp anymore, and I was extremely unreasonable to deal with. When you're not taking in enough food, it's like trying to drive with a nearly empty tank in your car. You're more likely to break down when you least expect it. So, how do you pack smart with food? Well, to avoid this, I always plan out my food and calorific requirements in great detail, especially for those longer trips. And I'll normally give myself a little non-rationed food just in case I need something extra. For big trips, I'll be planning this well in advance using my meal planner, which you can download for free in the description down below. My meal planner ensures I'm getting enough calories in while not overweighing myself with copious amounts of unnecessary food. You want snacks that are calorie dense but lightweight, like nuts, dried fruit, energy bars, even a bit of chocolate. These are your hiking power banks. Small, but packed with energy to keep you going. And here's a very basic rule of thumb that I use for myself. I try to take anywhere from around 300 to 400 calories per hour that I will be hiking. And even that can be a little bit under sometimes. If we're up for a long day, this adds up and it's better to have extra than to run out. If you're doing a multi-day hike, make sure you pack full meals that are easy to prepare and high in carbohydrates and fats. Things like pasta, instant noodles, dehydrated or freeze-dried meals. Think of these like filling up the petrol tank at the end of the day, getting you ready for the next leg of your journey. And the non-ration snacks, well, it's also a smart move to have emergency snacks, or as we like to call them, non-rationed. Just in case your hike takes longer than planned or you burn through your energy quicker than expected. I always pack a couple of high-calorie bars or an extra freeze-dried meal or a double-sized freeze-dried meal that I can split in half and use the other half later if I need it, just in case. These act like a reserve fuel tank. You might not need them, but if you do, they can be a game changer. And if I don't use them, I just have a really big feast on the last night of the hike. You'll feel your energy come back almost instantly, giving you that little boost to finish strong. By keeping your energy levels high, you'll not only enjoy the hike more, but you'll also stay more alert and make smarter decisions, and you'll avoid those energy crashes that can derail your entire day, and you don't want that. But there is another thing that could completely derail your day, and that is ignoring the unpredictability of weather. When you're new to hiking, or even like me, if you've been hiking a while, it is easy to underestimate just how fast the weather can turn on you. You can start out in perfect sunshine, enjoying the views, and before you know it, dark clouds roll in, the wind picks up out of nowhere. It's like 1 minute you are in paradise and the next nature throws an absolute curveball at you that you did not see coming. And let me tell you from experience that when the weather turns, it doesn't just make things uncomfortable, it can make them downright dangerous. Especially here, the mountains here in Tasmania in particular are notorious for unpredictable weather. I've seen this firsthand, I don't know how many times. People start a hike in shorts and a t-shirt only to end up shivering when the wind picks up or the rain starts falling. This is why relying on the weather forecast alone is like betting on a coin flip. Forecasts give you an idea, but they can't predict those sudden shifts in the microclimate, especially here in the Tasmanian peaks or remote areas where the mountain ranges seem to have their own weather systems. So here's the thing, always ensure you have the right gear for the right area you'll be visiting. Keep a rain jacket in your pack, even if it's sunny when you leave, even for a short day walk. This is a rule, a golden rule that I have followed for years. And even today, when I am walking 5 to 10 kilometers a day around my hometown here, I always have a backpack with a raincoat in it. Over the years, I've come across many people completely unprepared for sudden changes in the weather, and often it leads to life-threatening situations. We see it all too often, and it could have been easily prevented by being aware of the weather conditions and forecasts, as well as packing the appropriate gear. And this isn't just about staying dry, it's about keeping your core temperature up. Once you get wet or cold, your body burns through energy just trying to keep warm. And if you're not prepared, you'll find yourself not just uncomfortable, but potentially in danger of hypothermia, even in what started as mild conditions. So think of your gear as your safety net. It doesn't matter if the sky's blue and the sun's shining. Nature loves to surprise you. Just like packing enough food and water, ensuring you have the right gear is one of those small steps that can make a huge difference when you're out there. And do you know what else can lead to problems if you're out in the middle of nowhere? Well, that is relying too much on trails and maps. And a very common error that I have seen many times over, and even by some very seasoned hikers, including myself on one occasion, is relying too much on a trail, a marked trail, and maps. Assuming that as long as there's a trail marker in sight, everything will be fine, is not the greatest strategy. But here's the reality. Even the best marked trails can lead you astray.
Where are we, man? I don't know, man.
It doesn't take much to miss a turn or get confused by a trail split, and suddenly you're off course.
Welcome back. Well, I don't know where we left you last time, but we've just been walking around in circles in the mist.
I can think just off the top of my head 3 or 4 particular trails in Tasmania where you get to a junction and there is a taped or a marked junction heading that way, and there is another one kind of heading that way. It looks like you meant to go that way, but that is the wrong way. That was the right way, and I've done this myself, headed the wrong way down that track. It can be very hard sometimes to discern which trail is the correct way. Think of it this way. Trails are like highways, and just like on a road trip, if you take a wrong exit, you might not realise you're lost until you're miles away from where you're supposed to be. Trails and tracks can wind, diverge, or even fade out in very tricky terrain, and it's easy to miss the subtle changes in the landscape, especially if you're not paying close attention. We see this often on trails where there can often seem like an obvious way to go, but more often than not, as we start to follow what appears to be a track, we quickly realise that we have been deceived by a false lead. And like I was just saying, this is a very common occurrence here in Tasmania. Many of our remote walks to places like the Arthur Ranges have this as a common problem, and many hikers over the years have become lost and needed rescuing as a result following false leads. I remember one time on a trip to Tasmania's Federation Peak, finding a group of walkers who on a very sketchy section had obviously gone down the wrong trail. After some shouting out and communication with them, we were able to get them back on the correct track, but it was a good lesson in not always necessarily relying on the trail ahead as being correct. You do need to have your wits about you and to always be paying attention. And these days, I do sort of get a sense. The moment I go down a false lead, I sort of stop for a second and just check. I just check and have a look around, go back, make sure that we're on the right track. And this is something we find ourselves doing often. But what if you are on a very clearly defined trail with regular markers and all the rest of it? Well, it can still happen there. Let's say the weather shifts, thick fog rolls in, and suddenly what seemed like a straightforward path and track becomes disorienting. And those familiar landmarks around you were counting on to guide you disappear. The trail markers blend into the surroundings, you can't see the next one, and you start second guessing every single turn. This is where things can go quickly wrong if you're relying solely on the visibility of the trail. It's like driving without headlights at night. everything looks different and it's easy to get turned around. That's why having a backup navigation plan is essential. A lot of hikers, especially in today's digital world, depend heavily on GPS apps or phone maps. Sure, these tools are incredibly helpful. I use them all the time until they stop working. Maybe you lose signal, or your battery dies, or the app malfunctions in a remote area. It's like putting all your trust in a lifeline that could snap when you need it most. This is why you should always at least consider a physical map and a compass. It might seem old school, but these tools don't rely on batteries and they're relatively immune to technical glitches, and they are a good backup. The key, however, is knowing how to use them. Simply having a map and a compass in your pack won't help if you've never practiced basic navigation. It's like carrying a fire extinguisher without knowing how to operate it. It is useless in a crisis. So having someone in your party that can use those is very important too. But the biggest piece of advice I can give you is to make it a habit to study your route in detail before you start a hike. Know key landmarks, trail intersections, backup routes in case you get off track, emergency exit routes, and pay attention to your surroundings. Not just to the trail markers, but look at the terrain. Look at the mountains, the rivers, or the ridges around you and get an idea of where you are. They can serve as natural guides if you ever find yourself off the trail and wondering where you are. And if the weather turns or visibility drops, these landscape cues can become crucial for finding your way. I also like to make notes of these landmarks and features before I head out. I will create extensive notes for myself before any walk, even walks that I've been on before, and I will have those notes with me when I am on the trail. In short, don't let the trail lure you into a false sense of security. Keep your wits about you. It's certainly easy to get comfortable when the path is clear, but that can change in an instant. And with a little preparation and the right tools, you'll always have a way to find your bearings no matter what the trail throws your way. And if you really want to level up your skills for your next adventure, then check out this video up here where I go into the mental strategies I use to get me through tough hikes.